Go where your best prayers take you, unclench the fists of your spirit and take it easy. Breathe deeply of the glad air and live one day at a time. Know that you are precious and learn to trust. Amen. Well, happy Mother's Day to everyone. I hope that you have some good plans for this day, even if it's just to take it easy and relax a bit. All of you guys, I hope you've already done your shopping. I did mine on Wednesday, or you sent your flowers, or you're going to make that phone call today. Or if you're like me, your mother is no longer with you, I always use this as an opportunity to remember her and say my prayers and give thanks for her. It doesn't go, does it, without our understanding. It's an easy concept. Without moms, we would not be here. So, I don't know where you go from there, but it's pretty basic. So I hope you have a great day today. I don't know about you, Mother's Day really is, for me, too, kind of a beginning of summer. Around here it is. We really slow down a bit. The choir takes a break. Sunday schools take a break. We try to slow down. It gives us a chance to catch up with some of our duties, pastoral duties, and paint and fix and repair, all of that. But my brain also starts going to summer things like a little more golf or the pool or cookouts or vacation. Or yesterday really did all my almost final preparations for my tomatoes and my squash. And then maybe even getting to the mountains to do a little hiking. Did I say getting to the mountains and do a little hiking? That's really where my mind really goes. So today, in honor of me thinking about the mountains, I have a mountain story for you, but it's not about hiking. It's really about mountain climbing. So I want you to go not to the Smokies. I want you to go with me to the Swiss Alps in Switzerland. One of the mountains there you know the name of. Almost everybody knows. It's the Eiger. And it is probably one of the most challenging, if not the most challenging, climb for all mountain climbers. The north face is 6,000 feet straight up. It has a bit of a curve, but it's just a solid wall of black rock. And you have to go 5,000 feet to get that 6,000-foot climb, and even some above that, because it's a 13,000-foot mountain. And in 1957, lots of people have climbed it. 2 young Italians attempted to make the climb. The weather was pretty good, always strong winds, so they have to face that, and it's tough conditions. And they got up and they started climbing, and they made it 5,000 feet, and they totally ran out of gas. They just got stuck. They couldn't go up, they couldn't go down, and they climbed onto a little ledge. The problem was they were 1,000 feet from the top. What made it awful was that in the valley, hundreds of people were watching because they had telescopes and they could see them. There was a plane actually flying around once they realized they were stuck, offering reports and surveying and trying to keep up with the young men as they hung on for dear life, but you realize no one could get to them. The professionals would not go after them because the place they were in was so dangerous and so many people had died trying to rescue people from that ledge that they wouldn't even try it. But a small group of amateurs were watching and they just couldn't stand it. And so they banded together. There were about 18 or 19 of them. They made a plan, got their gear, and you realize what they had to do is, while these men were holding on for dear life, they had to go another route to get to the top. So they climbed a 13,000-foot mountain to try to rescue these young men. And they got above them. And their plan was to drop lower down one of their group. His name is Alfred Hellepart. They were going to drop him down by a thin, razor-thin cable, steel cable, lower him down to the ledge so that he could rescue these young men. And so they got up there, got everything, got him hooked up, started dropping him down, and I want you to listen to his description. Everett said, as I was lowered down, the summit where my comrades were grew farther distant, until they disappeared from my sight. And at that moment, I felt an indescribable aloneness. I have never been that alone. And it was almost like for the first time, I realized where I was. Hanging on the face of that black rock of the Eiger robbed my breath. I could barely catch my breath. He said, I cried out, involuntarily cried out. And when I looked up at that small cable holding me, I realized a tiny human dangling between heaven and hell. In phenomenal courage, indescribable courage, Alfred Hellepart accomplished his mission and brought both of those young men up. But those words, I read them weeks ago and they keep haunting me. Alone, hanging in the air, dangling between heaven and hell. And I don't know if you know this or not, but more and more people feel that way in our society. More people feel like they're dangling, just kind of hanging. On this Mother's Day, what I'm talking about is we think so much about family and connection and mothers. More and more people around us experience desperate loneliness. I don't know if you caught the news, but it snapped my head around. In January, the Prime Minister of England appointed a new post, a new cabinet post in the government. Do you know what that post is? Minister on Loneliness. It's not a joke. They did a major study in their country. They studied and interviewed thousands of people, single adults, new married, new parents, children and teenagers, disabled persons, caregivers, older persons, of course, living alone, some not, new citizens who were refugees. One of the things they found in their older group of Britons that over 200,000 said that they had not talked to a friend or relative, not had a conversation with a friend or relative for a month. But among all those other people, do you know what was reported? That a huge majority of them said they were lonely, regardless of age, regardless of the outward appearance of their lives. You know, closer to home, bring you back to this side of the pond, there's a man, a professor named John Cacioppo, and he has been studying loneliness at the University of Chicago for 25 years. And he is probably the world expert about this one thin slice of human experience. He describes loneliness as that feeling that you are isolated, that you are disconnected. But his conclusion is crystal clear. Loneliness is real. And he says it emanates from an interesting place in America. He can't speak for other places. But you know, we prize rugged individualism, don't we? We prize helping us be independent, which is a great thing. But the spinoff is this rugged individualism creates isolation. We learn to do it ourselves, by ourselves, only with ourselves, a lot. But whatever the cause, and you can read his books. He's got a great book on Amazon. Pick it up. It is worth reading. This drive about loneliness is real around us, and it is a huge health risk. And my guess is most of our docs and medical folk here know that. That literally loneliness is physically damaging. John believes that it is a higher health risk for death than being obesely overweight, being overusing drugs and alcohol, and ingesting pollutants in air and water. That it is that large an issue for us. But it's something we all know, that what is inside of us may be much more dangerous than what is outside of us. That is a spiritual note. Well, if loneliness is being disconnected, you realize there is an antidote. It is not simple. It is not just simply being around people. Dr. Cacioppo would not say that. It is about perspective. But I'll tell you one thing, the antidote is at the heart of Christianity. The antidote in response to loneliness is not just being with people, it's being connected to people. And we think about it and talk about it a lot and have. Over these last weeks, we've been reading the Gospel of John, one little piece after another. We started 2 weeks ago in chapter 15 with the vineyard image, and Tom Rasnick preached one of the most powerful sermons I think I've ever heard, talking about joy, but also talking about that deep in us we find God's love, and the way we see it is by the way we love each other, and if we'll bother to look, we'll see it all about us. And then last week, Chris, again, had another fabulous, one of my best I've ever heard sermons, and hit it out of the park talking about that God has chosen us, not in spite of who we are, but probably in a more mind-boggling way because of who you are. All the flaws and all the imperfections, the whole shooting match. God chooses you, chooses me. There are no ifs, buts, or when. There's nothing to change that. And then today we come to these words in front of you right now from the Gospel of John. I have made your name known to those whom you gave me. They were yours, and you gave them to me. You see, we are loved by God. We are chosen by God. And today John says something even deeper. We belong to God. It is a belonging. Do you come to church or do you belong to church? We belong to God. We belong to each other. You see, more than connected, the belonging is deeper. It is deeper. It will drive us and take us to deeper places. And on this Mother's Day, that's what needs to be proclaimed. That we belong to each other. What a perfect day to think about that perfect reminder of the umbilical connection to our mothers, that yes, give us life, but remind us that it's a primary connection to being human. That's what motherhood does. And likewise, our belonging to God and in God gives us life, but I would say it teaches us to be human. Belonging in God teaches us what it is to be a human being. You see, it is this clear. It is this clear. The persuasive ways that we live and love and reach out to others, that is what truly makes us humans. It is not isolation. It is not doing it oneself by oneself. It is living together. It is living interdependently. And remember, we start with the Gospel of John. I didn't say it. It's not a liberal New Age idea. God so loved the world. It is for the world. And you and I are called into that belonging. We are called into that way of living. And you know, there are people who do it. You know the name Andy Kaufman? Well, he's not well known, but I think he will be. He is a professor of Russian literature at UVA. He's a professor. He teaches Russian literature at the University of Virginia. And some years ago, when he was a bit younger, he's still a pretty young man, he realized his classes were terrible. The kids just sat there and hated being in Russian literature. And he thought, I'm going to do something about this because, you see, for him, he realizes that Russian literature is a doorway to something larger. It's not just learning Russian literature. Russian literature is a doorway to the human things that all of us live. Love and loss, navigating that loss and broken hearts, moral responsibility, the repair of societies when they malfunction. He said Russian literature has all of that right there. And guess what? When he began to teach that way, his students started catching it. And then he's got a little popular and the word got out and people wanted to be in his classes. Because see, he was teaching not just to learn it for the sake of learning, to learn it for the sake of your own living. And then he got another idea. He decided to take his class and classes on the road. And he went 60 miles down the road to the campus of the residential correctional facility of the state of Virginia. He took his young 18 to 21-year-olds, and he takes them every week and teaches Russian literature to the young men who are in jail. And what's happened is nothing less than miraculous. He calls it Books Behind Bars. And there's a new film being made about him. He teaches Russian literature to the inmates and to his UVA students. And then you know what they do? They do class together. They talk. They've gotten to know each other. They've become friends. It's an amazing story, and they discuss what they read. Early on, Dr. Kaufman said he's trying to figure out if this really worked, and he's teaching a story from Dostoevsky, and the story plot is this. A young man impetuously commits a double murder. He kills two people, and he's young. He's 18 or 19. And he goes to the love of his life, a young woman who he hopes to marry, hopes to settle down. Her name is Sonia. And he's basically going to tell her goodbye, but not tell her why. And then he just blurts out and confesses that he's committed these murders. And in the story, she says, "You will be caught. You will be punished." But what she also says is, don't ever forget that what you have done will not change the love I have for you. She says, I am going to love you regardless and love you always. It got quiet. The inmates, the young students, nobody said a word. And then a voice came. And know this, that the students don't often know why the boys, these young men, are in jail. They don't have any idea. And this young man said, hey, teach, Dr. Kaufman, where was my Sonia when I got sentenced to this place for murder? And he said, right there, he realized why they were there. That these young adult thieves and murderers and drug dealers and these young UVA students coming from upper middle class families and the professors learned again the essential ingredients of being human. And one of them is love and compassion and how much that means regardless of the place that we walk. I don't know about you, but I've thought a lot about him over a couple of weeks, and I sure hope that he and his students are doing some of this week-by-week teaching and experience because of what they learned and received in places like this. That some of them really are young Christian men and women, to be honest, and that they're out there because of who they've become, because how they were raised and what they heard from the people around them. These Christians are learning and relearning that reaching out, touching others, risking those encounters, because it's not easy sometimes, helping others see that they count, that they matter, that their lives matter, and that regardless of what they do or where they are, they do and will always be loved. They will always belong to God. That is what the Christian life is all about. And on this Mother's Day, I do really believe that when we do a little of that, however we do that, in small ways or big ways, most of them would be small, by the way. Everybody will receive the blessing. Happy Mother's Day. Amen.